So welcome everyone to our college symposium for the fall. I'm going to be uncharacteristically brief because we have a full program and I want to really keep the focus on assessment. But I do want to just appreciate everybody's work at the difficult start of the semester. It's really an unusual semester weather-wise, and it appears that it will continue to be. I was just talking with Dr. Pricer, and he apprised me of the fact that it is looking as if we're going to have a 30-hour storm, did you say, coming from Sunday night to Monday morning. Ron, do you have enough salt? So it's just that kind of year, and we have to do the best we can. You certainly, everyone is working as hard as they can, as smart as they can, in order to keep the college open. I want to particularly acknowledge the work of the B&G folk. I also want to acknowledge the work of the faculty because I know you struggle to get here sometimes, and students also struggle to get here, and it's never a right fit. On some days, some of the students are here, and you are here, and other days, others of the students are here, and you are here. And so it has become a really difficult time. We just can't fight the weather. And as you know, our condition here in CUNY is that we stay open like the public schools do. Fortunately, we don't get on the news because we stay open. And we don't get Al Roker getting on our case because we stay open, because we'd really be in trouble. But that is the philosophy. We can't change it. That's essentially who we are. We do ask you to do the very best you can to make good on those classes. And I know that the provost has written to you to explain and to ask for, and to instruct, to advise you as to how you can do that. And we're giving the same message to the students, that they really make good on the hours that they must put in, even if it is not at the traditional time to get the work done. And of course, one of the ways we can do that is through Blackboard. So I do want to thank you all, the college community, for your patience and your diligence in doing that. I want to give a preview that we are hoping again this year to really get the charter review done. A lot of work has gone on that for about 4 years. It's time that it sees the light of day. I do ask that you familiarize yourself with the changes that are being proposed and that you communicate within your departments and to your senators your will. And an issue that has been dogging us for some time, even though we have made many efforts, is the matter of customer service. It came up again yesterday in a town hall meeting, closing out the Foundations of Excellence. It is something that a small team of people, including Michelle Hodge, Geneva Walker-Johnson, that team is working on it. We continuously try to improve the customer service. We just don't seem able to sustain it, or at least we have new efforts like CUNY First that pull us back, but do know that we're quite cognizant of some of the things that don't work well as we work with students and the general staff and faculty, and we continue to work on that. So I'm going to yield, like a good colleague would in Congress, the rest of my time to my good colleague, Ron Thomas, to give us a little bit of an update on budget. So, Ron?
Thank you, President Keyes. Before I get into the budget update, I'd like to do two things. One is to introduce a number of new colleagues to the institution, one of whom I know is here. The other two may not be here. But the first is Dr. Latoro Yates, who is our new Director of Admissions, and he is sitting right here in the front. Another is Mr. Ismael Perez, who is the new AVP for Budget and Finance. Ismael is perhaps somewhere at the college or downtown at a meeting. And the third is Mr. James Minto, who is the new Executive Director of Facilities, and I know James is downtown at a meeting. like President Keys, I'd like to thank you for your cooperation and your patience through this very hectic season of snow and then even more snow. But I encourage you to continue to look at the college's website where we will continue to post notices. Hopefully you're receiving those notices to let you know when we are open. And as the President says, unless the Board of Education or the Department of Education is closed, we will be open. But there may be unique circumstances depending on the tracking of weather that might permit us to close if that is warranted. So stay tuned to the website and we'll provide you with updates as they become available. With respect to the budget, the update is very brief. There is good news. As of December 31st through the first half of this fiscal year, the college's projections are on target. We anticipate that we will end the fiscal year with a surplus, not much of a surplus, but a surplus. And that's certainly a good thing. It will be the second consecutive year that we will end the fiscal year with a surplus. Earlier, I spoke to you about the number of positions that the budget office at the university had approved us to fill, and I believe there were 60. Of those positions, 45 have been filled, either with appointments arising from searches or with substitute appointments. Of the remaining 15 positions, 13 have been posted with closing dates within the next month or so. So I believe we are right on target to meet or get very close to the number of new positions that we intend to fill this fiscal year. Undergirding this, of course, is the enrollment. 60% of our budget is derived from revenue collected from tuition. This year's enrollment, fall over fall from last year, is down slightly, but not significantly, so that we do not anticipate the need for any financial adjustments arising from that slight decrease in enrollment. On the other side of the coin is enrollment in graduate programs went up. I should say the graduate program went up significantly, and that is certainly a very good thing. So with respect to the budget, I think we're in good shape. We are beginning the process, and one of the things that Ismail and I and other colleagues will be working on is a new process with which to engage in budgeting, not just on an annual basis, but on a multi-year basis as well. So I know he's begun a speaking and listening tour, and he may have spoken with a number of you in this room. We anticipate rolling out the new plan later on this spring. The final thing I'd like to talk about is Startup New York. You may have seen the ads on the local networks promoting yet another of the governor's initiatives to promote economic development throughout the state. The college has been designated a startup site. We have submitted a draft plan to the governor's office, which is being reviewed. We anticipate receiving a response to that plan sometime next week. In the plan, we focus on a number of areas where we believe we have faculty expertise that could lend itself to working with private companies to develop commercial products. And just to remind you, those areas are pharmaceutical research and manufacturing, medical research, medical device research and manufacturing, water resource management, supply chain, logistics and aviation, and wireless technology. We, meaning York, are one of 5 CUNY campuses that will be participating, or I should say have been designated to participate in Startup New York. The fact that we have been designated does not necessarily mean that all of this will come to fruition, because we still have to find a real estate developer to develop Site 9, since the state will not be providing the funding with which to develop the site. They're simply allowing the companies that do business on the site to be tax-free for 10 years. So there is no real cash coming with this. We have to find a developer, and we have to, of course, interest a company that would be willing to come into the community to establish its business enterprise. So that's kind of where we are on some of the big items, or I should say the big item as far as development is concerned. And the budget looks pretty good. Thank you.
So to the heart of today's symposium, and we really want to leave time for engagement. So the symposium is kind of framed by our accreditation work and our academic program review work. Those of you who've been around the college for a while now know that assessment is very much an important part of what we do, and seeking external accreditation is something that has been ongoing for many years. So we're at a point in our history at York where we have really established a very sound base of accreditation and reaccreditation. And it is on that sound base that we believe we can go forward to look for some additional accreditations, for instance, in the business area, and to also continue to really get to the core of assessment, which really is driving a lot of what the accreditors are looking for. And beyond the accreditors, it ought to be guiding us as we make decisions about changes in programs, how we teach, and the like. And so, as you know, we went through our periodic review process with Middle States, and we were able to come out with a solid reaccreditation, and we look forward to 5 years when we will have our decennial. Occupational therapy has undergone its accreditation, and though there's a little tweaking that it must do, it is pretty much on its way. Our clinical lab science has done a baseline and is working, again, I think, towards some additional accreditation. Our PA program is accredited and reaccredited. Our nursing just got an 8-year reaccreditation. Phenomenal nurses, right? Our teacher ed also got, and where is Linda Michelle? Can't miss her in white, got their accreditation. Social work, while we don't have the letter in hand yet, I don't think, right, Susan? It has been written, and we can say that we, again, at social work will have that 8-year accreditation. And I heard from Dr. Ojilachuka this morning that we have our, is it PEK through 12. So we've got a solid base of accreditations, and as part of those exercises, we had to really engage seriously in assessment. And I think for some years now, individual departments, individual people, individual programs, certainly a number of academic program reviews, and in certain places across the college, we really have been getting that done. We even have had 2 major assessment plans, most of which have been completed, at least maybe 80%, and we're in the process of putting together another assessment plan college-wide that will carry us for the next 2 or 3 years. And so it's in that context that I want to invite Donna Chirico, Dean Chirico, to lead the panel that will focus on assessment. So, Donna?
Thank you, President. I don't know the name of the person who's up in the booth, otherwise I would be more polite, but could we pull up that PowerPoint? Thanks. Sometimes there's serendipity in things, and I found it rather interesting that in one of the websites of which I'm an active member, which is the American Statistical Association, there has been an intriguing conversation over the last week in and around assessment. And I found it interesting that these statisticians at their various institutions were being called upon to participate in how this gets done. And my colleague, Charles Blake, who's at James Madison University, he put it into a perspective that I like very much. He said, when you talk about assessment, you have the Goldilocks problem. If you just rely on classroom assessment, if you just rely on low-level assessment, it's too cold. If you start getting very abstract and saying, what are our students doing 10 years after they leave the college, and have they been transformed as human beings, right? Then you're asking too much, and it goes beyond the bounds that we can assess. It's too cold. I mean, too hot, right? Too hot, too cold. But then, of course, the part that we have not been able to resolve, and when I say we, I mean higher education, is what should assessment look like? What is it, and how is it getting done? And I believe very strongly that the accrediting institutions like Middle States, who oversees York College here in the Northeast, they don't know either yet. This is a conversation that is unfolding, and how it's going to look in 10 years will be interesting to see. So that we are at a very interesting time because I believe we have tremendous influence in affecting how this will unfold over the next 10 years. So to me, I think it's extremely important for us to play a very active role in this. Next slide, please. Yes, you. Just very clearly, assessment is not just about your classroom. Right? It's not just giving a student a multiple choice test and then at the end of the term giving the student a grade. Right? Assessment means every single person on this campus has to be involved. And we've spent a good deal of time on the academic side, and as you're going to hear when Michelle Hodge speaks, we now have to shift it to the institutional side. Right? We need to know what's going on, what are we doing, how are we moving forward. Next slide, please. Here you have a before and after of what assessment will probably look like at York College. The left slide, the before, there's a lot going on, but it's a mess. It's all over the place. We don't know necessarily who's doing what. We don't even know if people are really doing anything. And yet, when we begin to ask, we find out, my goodness, there's so much being done, but how come I don't know about that? So that what we need to do, and that's what the chore of the Outcomes Assessment Committee is this year, is to take that picture on the left and make it the picture on the right. We want to know who's doing what, where is everything, and coordinate it in some organized way so that we understand at some very fundamental level how is it going with respect to the academic side and the institutional side and overall effectiveness of the institution. Next slide, please. Because if you don't, you run into the same problem that Einstein had, which is, I know it's here somewhere, right? We know we're doing certain things. As I've been going around the college and talking to various departments, various units, and saying, what are you doing? Everyone says, oh yes, we're assessing this, this, this. And I say, where's the data? And this is what I'm told. I know it's here somewhere. By the way, Einstein, if you've ever seen pictures of his whole desk, it was always a mess. Right? So he had some very interesting things to say about the links between creativity and things being messy, but we know there's no real evidence for that. It was really just him, okay? So the point of getting organized and putting this all into one place is so that we know what we're doing, we know who's doing it, and of course, how we move forward from here. Next slide. So the point is that assessment is happening right now. The strategic plan, which was put into place a few years ago, has now been carefully analyzed, and we have many people in the room who are on the strategic planning committee, to see what has been achieved so that completed items can now be assessed. Right? In other words, you don't just do something and say, oh great, that's done. The term that you may have heard bouncing around is the dashboard. Right? This is assessment higher ed jargon, okay? But the dashboard means that the item is finished, it's sitting there. So now what do we do with it? Right? We have to go back, we have to look and see, did this initiative work? You've all seen over the past couple of years changes in advisement, changes in the way we treat first-year students. All right, many of these actions have now been fulfilled according to the strategic plan. Now we need to go back and say, has it made a difference? Do we need to revise what we did? Should we keep what it did? Right? And this becomes a piece of assessment that we forget about. Right? Just because something is finished doesn't mean it gets lost in the mess underneath the cat, okay? Secondly, right now, all units have collected reports about what has been done or what is underway. The Professor Mohammadi, Dr. Mohammadi, put together a template for us so we could do this. And the point is the one made earlier, which is that there is much good work going on. We have loads of results. In fact, I'm almost shocked at the results we have from places such as from CETL, such as from the Writing Across the Curriculum program. right? So as we're collecting all this information, we're saying, oh, yes, we did do this. So now we have to kind of organize it. And once we have 1 and 2 in place, then we can move towards very actively in the next 6 or 8 weeks or so, really sincerely updating our outcomes assessment plan so that we can take all of these things into consideration as we create the next model for the next 3 years, beginning in the fall through 2017. Next slide. You'll understand the link here later. Where do we go from here? And of course, the big issue is that we need now to fill in all the gaps. Because although we have a great deal, we don't have everything. There are places that very much need to be assessed that haven't been assessed at all. There are places where we started to do things and didn't follow through. So that as we move forward with our outcomes assessment plan, we really need to state very clearly where are the places, where are the needs for taking the next step. Next slide. Which is our movement towards comprehensive assessment, that it's all being done in an organized way. For the academic units, assessment must move from the course level to the program level to the department level as guided by your academic program reviews. Remember those? You did it, it was like 300 pages, you put it on a shelf, it's collecting dust. You need to pull down that review. Right? Because in your review, you laid out what your needs were. You laid out all the good things you're doing. Many departments have been doing assessment. Many departments, again, we heard earlier about accreditation. All of the accredited areas have been doing this in a very systematic way. So we need to turn to those program reviews and use them as our action plan and guide for the next steps we need to take. Now, the service units assessment really needs to evaluate all aspects of student interaction. You know, we constantly hear, oh, students are not satisfied. And I kind of look at that and as a person who has teenagers, I kind of hear that and I say, right? Are they ever satisfied? But when you look at the kinds of assessment that are done, both here at York and at the university level, what you realize very often is that the actual percentage of students who respond to some of these surveys is very low. So who tends to respond? The folks with gripes, right? So we know there are areas we need to improve, but we also need to do a better job at hearing what the entire community has to say and get a better sense of, you know, I can tell you probably in 3 minutes everything that's wrong, but I want to know what's working well, right? And that's the part where we have to remember, if there's something that's working well over here in a service unit, well, maybe over here we can kind of take a look at that and mirror what's being done. What are they doing right that we're not doing right? And then, of course, for the institutional units, the assessment plans and cycles of assessment have to be created to match the APR process. Right? Those of you who don't perhaps know how the academic process works is that every 5 years, an academic department has to go through a self-study. Well, we need to create an APR system for the institutional side of the house, right? For the service side of the house, so that every year a different group is underway. We don't want to do, you know, I'm a chair of outcomes assessment. I do not want to evaluate everything at the same time, right? That's just a silly idea. So we need to create a cyclical model that follows the APR system. So then, a big issue you need to keep in mind is that assessment is intricately associated with our strategic plan. In order to understand how the next strategic plan must be modified, the assessment process has to loop back to where planning started, right? How did we do with what we said we were going to do? Sometimes things are no longer relevant, right? Maybe there are things that dropped out that we don't even want to assess because they don't exist anymore. And those of you who have been here more than a couple of years, you vaguely remember something called the CPE, right? We don't need to have this there anymore. So we need to use assessment to figure out where we go next. Otherwise, we can't know what works, what doesn't work, or whether we are missing a shoe. Okay? So then lastly, anybody recognize that picture? I was going to say thank you. Now let's move towards happily ever after. Right? If you recognize the picture, you don't want to admit you're addicted to Downton Abbey. Questions, concerns, comments. Because that's really the overview of where we are, where we're heading, the intricate details of the precise assessments and what's going on, you will all know about. So this is just kind of the general view of where we're heading and what we're doing. Questions? Okay. Then that said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Hodge.
Thank you, Dr. Charico. Good afternoon, everybody. I always remember when I was doing my graduate work, the professor of my quality control course came out and said, what gets measured gets managed. And he was quoting Peter Drucker. And as I've been working with the Outcomes Assessment Committee, that quote comes to mind. I'd like to add a little tag to it, which is, what gets measured can also be improved. So I'm here today for just a few minutes, just representing the institutional side of the House, to tell you a little bit about what we're doing to be part of this Outcomes Assessment Initiative. Now, we have a few examples of what we already have been doing, and you all have been participating in some of these things. Things like public safety, who's been assessing their area for some time now, and I'm sure many of you have participated in some of their surveys. But there are also student service areas such as admissions and the testing office that will soon start to collect data and look for assessment tools that will allow them to appropriately assess their areas as well. And of course, there's financial aid, who started their assessment a little while ago, but we were working on CUNY First, and we continue to work on CUNY First, particularly in the financial aid area, which we will currently be bringing up a new module, it looks like sometime very soon. But once that's done, we will get back to financial aid working on their assessment piece. Now, anytime I get to speak in front of this group, I usually speak about CUNY First, so let me go ahead and get that out of the way. So speaking on CUNY First, we're soon going to have that entire CUNY First system up and running. And once that's done, we're going to have to assess that too. So we'll be looking at how CUNY First has affected our operation and see what we can do to not only improve the CUNY First system, but also the offices that heavily use it. We're also going to start looking at some of the administrative offices, and the president has indicated that the president's office will be a vanguard in this effort, and they're going to be one of the first offices to be assessed. There are some other colleagues that are with me on the administrative side that are going to do those type of assessments, or at least try to get them started and turn them over to the offices. People like Mondell Seeley of Institutional Advancement, Earl Simons, who does our government and public relations, as well as works in the President's Office suite, and myself working in enrollment management, but also working with the other parts of the Administrative Affairs Division of the college. In many places, we're just learning how to do this. And so what we've done is we try to learn from some of the experts on campus, which are the faculty and in their APR model, or the Academic Program Review model. And as Dr. Charico mentioned earlier, we will be looking at different offices and putting them on some predetermined schedules for assessment. So for instance, sometime in the future, you might see a document stating that admissions gets assessed every 3 years using a certain industry standard assessment tool, or maybe one that we have created here in-house for that area. So there are a lot of other assessment things going on in the institutional side of the house that are too numerous for me to mention here with the few minutes I have. But I want to mention two more real quickly. We have been doing an alumni survey that has been administered through the institutional advancement area. And we've been doing that for several years, and we have data there that we're going to be able to use to do some measurements. But we also have the Noel Levitt Student Satisfaction Survey that is used university-wide and locally administered by our institutional research team. These are important data sets that we're going to be able to build assessment on. And you're probably going to see some of that first when we come out with our assessment plans for the coming year. So with that, I just want to thank the administrative offices that have been working with us on this. They have been collecting data. Some of them have been making decisions based on the data that we have collected so far, and we look forward to formalizing it more in an APR style format so that the whole college can see and learn from what we're doing. And we're all very happy to join with the entire institution to plan, do, and assess our efforts to bring the best possible education opportunities to our students.
Thank you so much. For our next speaker is going to speak to us a little bit about what's going on with assessment in the student development area. Cecily Horsham-Brathwaite.
In the Division of Student Development, we are very much excited to engage in outcome assessment. And I'll tell you in just a few moments about some of the efforts that are happening at the CUNY-wide level that have helped to guide us in this process. I think it's important to note that in terms of outcome assessment, in one way, it's very exciting to think how we might gather information about the work that we're doing. And the other way, it's also sometimes experienced as a very big task. I think we continually gain information that lets us know about the work that we're doing, and sometimes, though, the challenge is to codify that information to be clear about the patterns that we are engaging in and how well we are doing what it is that we intend to do. Some of the guidance that we have received in terms of outcome assessment comes from our professional organizations such as the American College Personnel Association and then the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators. Those organizations, in fact, have entire conferences focused on how we in student affairs can better identify what we are doing in terms of outcome assessment. And there's a belief that given the work that we do in student affairs in terms of developing programs and services, that we are very well suited to assess the ways that we enhance the learning that occurs outside of the classroom. Some of the guidance that we also receive in terms of outcome assessment comes from the Council for Academic Standards, which also helps our individual offices such as career services or counseling services to be able to identify some very clear learning objectives and ways in which to measure whether or not we've reached those objectives. So we're now going to the third slide. Great, thank you. So again, as I mentioned, there's been some CUNY-wide efforts in terms of leading us within student affairs and student development regarding outcome assessment. Many of my colleagues across the Division of Student Development, when we were working on our outcome assessment assignment, let me know that their individual councils, as directed by Vice Chancellor Sanchez, have been working to really identify beyond the satisfaction surveys that many of our offices engage in, what are some ways that we might better identify how to assess outcomes in the work that we do. Then, of course, there's our work in partnership with the Outcome Assessment Committee to look at ways in which we might mirror the process that goes along for the APR in terms of having a standardization about what we assess and when we assess it on an ongoing basis. And within the division, we continuously have these conversations to help us to guide the differences in our various student development disciplines to figure out how we can identify the points of intersection in the work that we do. And of course, in addition to the CUNY-wide and college-wide assessment that is going on, some of our subcommittees or departments within the Division of Student Development have some external funding sources, such as the TRIO programs and the SEEK program, that require them to assess information in a particular way. The next slide, please. Some of the ways that we engage in outcome assessment, I think back to the Academic Affairs Assessment Day that we were able to join the presentation about where one should start when engaging in outcome assessment. And I thought it very important to even begin by looking at what the mission statement is for the various offices within the Division of Student Development. And each one of us has a mission statement that guides the work that we do, and it provides some information for us as to where we might go next to better formulate our outcome assessment. Some other activities that occur are satisfaction surveys. We often evaluate the events and workshops that we have targeted to students to ask them whether or not they learned something at the event, whether or not they felt that they learned something that they could implement, and whether or not those activities that we've had over the course of our programming year impacted their academic experience and their social experience on campus. And then lastly, for example, we engage in needs assessment. Recently, we conducted another assessment of the Study Up Till Midnight program, where students have an opportunity to stay on campus late to study and to get some additional support. And the information that they gave us was pretty interesting. In some ways, we thought that what they really wanted was the food that they get, and they did tell us that they very much do want the food, but they also told us that they very much were interested in having advisors and administrators and counselors there to support them during that process when they're here on campus late at night. And that was new information for us. The next step is to figure out what exactly they would like us to do with them while we're there. And so it was a learning experience for us. We asked the question, and there are more questions to ask. Next slide, please. And as Dr. Cherico mentioned, we're very much guided by the strategic plan in terms of where student development fits. And in particular, Initiative 2.3 and 3.1b really talk about the importance of making available information as to what we're doing in the Division of Student Development to the larger college community, and also to assess, to embed assessment in the work that we are doing. Next slide. Now, I know you won't be able to see that, but what that chart outlines is information regarding some of the activities that the various units within the Division of Student Development are engaging in. So, for example, the Center for Students with Disabilities sent out a survey to faculty, staff, and students to ask them what they knew about the office, what they thought about changing the name of the office from the STAR program to now what is the Center for Students with Disabilities. And so we remember that outcome assessment isn't just about assessing students, but it's also about assessing faculty and staff members to ask them as to what their input would be regarding the work that we do and the services that we offer. And again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the offices within the division have some very clear guidelines as to what they assess, such as the SEEK department and the TRIO services, that their external funders really let them know what types of information, including retention data, that helps drive the work that they do in the office. Next slide. So where are we going next? We need to, I think, clarify what exactly, what outcomes exactly we will be measuring within the Division of Student Development. Certainly, the strategic plan speaks to letting us know where we might go. Also, we want to get a sense of, will all of our offices be looking at student satisfaction? What kind of information do we want to know from the workshops that we have on academic success skills across the division? So to really begin to identify and clarify that. Also, in clarifying what we want to know, we also find it important to be clear about how we will gather that information. Will we develop our own surveys and instruments here on campus, or will we use some already standardized, nationally utilized assessment tools? We, of course, will continue to partner at all levels regarding outcome assessment. I'm really glad to be at the table to talk about the particular and unique ways in which student development works on a college campus and the ways that we add to the college experience for our students. We also will look at what best practices are not just across the university, but across the nation in terms of what other campuses with populations such as ours might be doing. And lastly, we find it very important to make sure that when we assess outcomes, that we improve the way in which we share information with you all about the work that is occurring within the Division of Student Development. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you all. It's one of these events that I call staying on the same page. Glasnost for the older ones. This one is about the early alert, the cardinal pulse system, and I really think of this in at least two different ways. One, I see the cardinal pulse early alert system that we rolled out this spring as sort of part of the institutional commitment to student success. And the other is really to give you another tool here in the hands, in the classroom, at home, whenever you may be reviewing student records and say, there's a student maybe needs some attention from not me, but perhaps somebody else, writing center, math center, counseling, as it may be. And you can right then and there access and create a record for the student to be flagged in some way if that student, in your opinion, may have an academic challenge or perhaps another challenge. But also, and I don't want to anticipate too much of the brief PowerPoint that we have, it's a tool also to flag students, and was mentioned earlier, let us know the good stories, students who have ambitions, students who do exceptionally well, show great potential in the classroom and beyond. Let us know about them too. There may be resources that we can connect them to, all right? They may also be featured in some way or another in some of the promotional stuff that we're doing. But of course, the cardinal pulse is only effective to the extent that it's being used, and I'm not sure to what extent it is being used yet. At least at the beginning of the semester, I sent out on behalf of the provost a memo telling you how this works, where you can find it, how you can access it. There is also a web page, we get to that as well, and we have created a cardinal pulse documentation, a few screenshots that show you how to access, how to create a record, and how to flag the student, move a student on. We have talked about being intentional. I see it as part of being intentional when it comes to helping students to succeed. Again, I think we're all pulling at the same string here when we are talking about our student successes. We have talked about, and when I say we, not just here at York, but beyond York, in the academy, about intrusive advisement. And so the foundations of excellence, which the early alert system is one of the early results of, looks at the first year, but also goes beyond. And so the early alert is also be seen as one element of a larger assemblage of tools that we hope to develop and roll out in the future to help our students move along from the first year all the way towards graduation. So as I said, it was piloted in the fall with a group of 24 faculty who helped us get a first sense of how this works and what needs to be changed. And it was rolled out for everybody, all full-time, all part-time faculty at York for this spring semester and forevermore. So we are also, of course, it's a new system, and we want to hear from you feedback. If there are things working well, if there are things that are not working well with the system, we can tweak that. It's a system that we didn't buy anywhere, purchase. It's something that was created by our technology specialists on campus. So it's our own. And so we are able and, of course, willing to recalibrate as we go along. With that said, there are much better prepared comments by Dr. Horsham Brathwaite, and she'll tell us a little bit more about the system. Thank you.
I'm back. For those of you who I've not had the opportunity to meet, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm the director of the Counseling Center. It's been about a year that I've been there, and I hope to get to know more of you. And I think that that's important because there are often questions regarding where do the Cardinal Pulse cases go. They go to academic advisement and to counseling, and I'm one of the people who responds to them, so that you'll be able to attach a face with the work that's being done. Next slide, please. So clearly, Cardinal Pulse is a retention tool, and we know many reasons why it would be helpful to have an early alert system. I thought it interesting in preparing to speak with you today very briefly to find this quote that talked about fragmented retention efforts and silos on campus. And having gone through the Foundations of Excellence process and having read the report, that is not new to me in terms of the feedback that we might even experience here at York. Next slide, please. And so Cardinal Pulse as an early alert opportunity is a way to seamlessly transmit information from the faculty to those of us in the support services areas that are able to then meet with students and to be able to support you in the work that you're doing to aid in their success. Next slide. Cardinal Pulse was a project that was initiated prior to the Foundations of Excellence process began. However, at the same time, a recommendation that directly came from the Foundations of Excellence self-study was that we have an early alert program to give you opportunities as faculty members to seamlessly and easily let us know when you had a student who was of concern. The program is meant for students to identify students who are both at risk as well as high-performing students. And as was mentioned earlier in the program, when Dean Chirico talked about outcome assessment, there are many things that are going on campus that are happening really well, and we don't always get to hear those success stories. So we very much would like to hear from you when there's students who you feel would benefit from additional opportunities on campus. Advisors in the Advisement Center and counselors in the Counseling Center monitor the Cardinal Pulse cases, and then those students who are identified are then referred to services within different offices across the campus, including the Math Center, the Counseling Center, to the Honors Program. Next slide. So what are the benefits to faculty members? Well, it helps with interdepartmental collaboration to minimize the sense of silos that might exist at times and often unintentionally. It also provides support and resources for the faculty members to be able to know what's available to you in helping your students. It's a very efficient system, and certainly we piloted it in the fall. The more that it is used during the spring semester, the better able we will be to fine-tune the system so that it is increasingly responsive to student needs and your needs as faculty members when you open up a case. And as part of the process, faculty members receive a notification that the case was received, and when the case is closed, you get a notice back letting you know that the case has been closed. And again, sometimes there's information that you might want to transmit, knowing that the work that you're doing can take you into working at midnight or 11 o'clock at night. We won't be in the office to receive your information, but you can open up a case on Cardinal Pulse, and it is secure, and there's a place for confidential notes or information to go, as well as a place to note, give me a call because this is something that I would rather discuss than put in the system. Next slide. To best use Cardinal Pulse, we recommend that you inform students about the program so that they know that a case might be opened for them, and that it is most helpful, since it's an early alert program, that we open up cases within the first 5 weeks. However, it is live throughout the semester, so it's okay to do it in the 10th week of classes, but if there's something that you see early on, giving us that information early is very useful to us. We also recommend letting the student know of your concern and letting them know that you are going to get additional resources for them. Certainly, when students are referred to the counseling center and a faculty member says to them, "I'm going to refer you to the counseling center, is that okay?" Often our students are very responsive to that, and it helps them to know that the faculty member cares enough to provide a next step for them to get the help that they need. The system is confidential, but also we want to make sure that you know that when students are referred to us and that they know that any confidential information that they share that would be more appropriate for them to share with whichever office they're referred to, for example, disability support services, that we will keep that information confidential and not disclose it broadly, and anything that they ask us not to disclose to you, we would make sure to honor that. And also, it's an opportunity not only to let students know in the beginning when you're opening up a case, we would suggest to them that they follow up with the faculty members, but we know sometimes that does not happen. So we encourage you to follow up with them to ask them how things are going. Next slide. This is just what the screen looks like visually. You'll note it says add URL there. My apologies. Next slide. Greg Vega has created a really beautiful and sophisticated decision tree that we were in awe of when we saw. But for ease, let me just give you a sense of some of what happens with the Cardinal Pulse process. When a faculty member initiates a case, it's received by an advisor or counselor, and that's just that they share which week they are monitoring the system. Once they review the case, an action plan is developed. Sometimes the issue is an academic advisement issue, and so if the academic advisor receives it, they'll manage it right then and there, and the case might be easily and quickly closed. A referral is made to the appropriate office, and the student has an opportunity to accept or decline the referral, and that is important to know. It's also important to, again, tell them about it in advance so that when they get this email inviting them to an office, that they are primed for responding to the information. The system is set up so that it is responsive enough to, when we click a box saying this action has been taken or the case is closed, that it will send a notice to you. And once all of the steps have been taken, the case is then closed, and then the student continues on. So I'll second Holger's point that we very much would like to support the utilization of Cardinal Pulse and to give us feedback verbally or in written format to let us know what the experience is like for you so that we can give that feedback to the software developer and be able to continue to meet our students' needs. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will be characteristically brief. Before I start, I would like to follow up on Vice President Thomas' introductions. Mr. Ismail Perez, our Assistant Vice President of Finance, is here. And following in the spirit of assessment, I want to let everybody know that we are in the middle of an assessment exercise right now. That's the collegiate learning assessment instrument that we are asked to do by the university, and we do it for our freshman class and our graduating class, and in the spring we do it for the graduating class. About 250 students have been nominated by the university as eligible to take that exam, and we need at least 100 of them to take it within 2 weeks. So far we have 20 that signed up to take it. We sent out the names of the eligible students yesterday to all the department chairs. Please encourage your majors to take that exam. It's very important that we meet the 100 students goal. Uh, a new advisement structure has been implemented at the college following the recommendations of the task force on advisement that has been working on the plan for 2 years. The structure is been in place and is of course in the academic advisement center, and which we integrated a few more people in there. And also I want to thank you that now that we are CUNY First veterans, we have been working with the system. There are glitches in the system and there will be glitches in the system, but it's important that we learn the language of the system and so we be able to communicate with students. We experience difficulties with our students, but not as many as the other colleges, and that is basically because of you. It's because of the faculty and the participated in the training, and we are able to register and turn in grades in the system without really a lot of friction. For that, everybody deserves congratulations and everybody deserves recognition. Other than that, I want to thank you for coming here today, and I want to thank all the people who put together this event, the office staff in the Office of the President, the Office of Academic Affairs, the public safety people, the cafeteria, the Performing and Fine Arts Center. And we are going to have enough time to talk outside where we enjoy the refreshments that the President's office provided. Thank you.